Welcome to Getting Intimate with Intimacy. I am Jamie London Wollberg. My pronouns are he, they.
I'm Jayne, she, her.
And I am May. This is a space for deep exploration of the mind, body, and soul connection.
Getting Intimate with Intimacy covers consistent multimedia content spanning all forms of intimacy, from sexual to intellectual, and everything in between.
Our content is created for all beings, bodies, and abilities, age 18 and up.
And it can be enjoyed on YouTube as well as OnlyFans and InsightTimer. The links will be in the description on for our live streams.
We're really looking forward to experiencing the infinite layers of intimacy with you.
And remember, intimacy starts within.
Namaste.
Namaste. Hello. Welcome to episode number 2 of Getting Intimate with Intimacy. I'm so excited to be here with you and my co-host today. I'm Jayne, she, her.
I'm Jamie, he, they.
And my name is May.
So today we will be talking about what is emotional intimacy. May, let's start with you.
Okay.
What does it mean? What does emotional intimacy mean to you?
Okay, so I have been reflecting on it a little bit more since we were going to do this episode, and I think it's the one that I find the most relevant one from my perspective because of I have the emotional part associated to feelings, and feeling is such an important part of this human experience. Even more than the intellectual, and I am a very intellectual person, but the feeling is, I think, is the experience for me of my deeper self, because I can think of me and I can channel through very high thoughts or perspectives, but it's more in the feeling that I have the closest experience of my true energy, what I truly am. So once I have realized what I truly am, and for me, that's the closest to an emotional intimacy with myself, then I can connect emotionally with someone else. And for me, for example, that is super relevant before any kind of sexual contact. But I think we can get into that later.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, May.
Of course.
What does emotional intimacy mean to you? And I'd love to respond to that in a bit too.
Yeah. Well, my reply to May first is, 100% we need to have intimacy of all the ranges of intimacy with ourselves first before we can with anyone else. For me, emotional intimacy is in essence such a foundational intimacy as well to the human experience, because as we talked about last episode, we're human beings and we come here to have an emotional experience. Emotional intimacy is a deep awareness and connection to your feelings, to what your heart says, whether you love something, whether you like something, whether you feel happy or sad or angry or grief, whatever it is that you are feeling, and not running away from it, right? It's the bypassing of our emotions that actually rubs up. That's the friction against the resistance against us having emotional intimacy, is bypassing. So to me, emotional intimacy is purely that awareness of how we feel inside. And an expansion of that is how we acknowledge others, how they feel, and the messiness, the beautiful mess that comes with trying to understand our own emotions as well as others.
Yeah, also valuable perspective. And so, as May was saying, having that emotional intimacy with yourself first, that deep understanding, and like you said, feeling your feelings, not running away. I agree with what Jamie said, we are emotional feeling beings here. And I love this topic because it's very near and dear to me, because I think that you can have other forms of intimacy with other people without the emotional component, right? But until you get that emotional intimacy within and with yourself, then that amplifies any other kinds of connections that you have with others, right? Because many would say that emotional intimacy is a deep connection between people that involves mutual understanding, trust, and vulnerability, right? And so you can have all of those things on various levels, but until you get deep with yourself, you're not going to find that with other people. And then also what came to mind for me as I was thinking about emotional intimacy is, well, it kind of does have to do with what Jamie said. And I'm trying not to repeat myself, but like you can have intellectual similarities with somebody, right? You guys can nerd out about a certain topic, for instance, whether it's science or gaming or whatever it is. That's intellectual intimacy to a degree. And then there's absolutely, you can have physical intimacy without an emotional connection. And you can then also be like so good at stuffing down your feelings. My old attachment style was avoidant. So due to the way I was raised in that environment, I stuffed my emotions because I was told I was too emotional. Don't cry so much. Don't be a baby, you know. So I did run away from my feelings for a long time. And then when I let them all in, I was like, I have too many emotions. So what? Oh, wait, I have 5 planets in Scorpio. There's no such thing as too many emotions. It's just being able to flow with the flood, the river, the trickle, whatever it feels like in the moment. And actually, I really appreciate Jamie and his friendship and support in helping me embrace that, right? Like, no, Katie, you are a feeling being, and that's okay. And now I know, like with the understanding of my birth chart a little bit more, like I just mentioned, the 5 planets in Scorpio, I've been able to embrace that a little bit. And when I'm being silly, I'm like, I was hashtag born that way. I'm an emotional being. So this is one of my favorite topics. Did anybody want to give some feedback on that?
So yes, dear, I think you cannot get away in this life with not feeling or trying to feel a little. Like you have to embrace all those feelings. It was tough for me in the beginning as well, as I'm also very sensitive, and I have a Scorpio ascendant, and it was like too much thinking and too much feeling, and too much feeling was very problematic. I didn't find myself being too much thinking in society was a problem until when I was much more of an adult. But too much feeling was very challenging inside and outside as well. So I also repressed that very early in life. I think before I was an adolescent, and especially when I was an adolescent and everything started to be so intense, I was like, oh my God, I need to numb myself down, or I don't know how I'm going to go through this life experience. And I didn't do that consciously. I'm just reflecting on how unconsciously I thought that was the best decision, until a few years ago, where I realized that I couldn't go against my own nature, because if I continued to do so, I was constantly being in a suffering state because of the distortion that I was experiencing inside. So I had to learn how to be in this world and being very sensitive and very emotional. Now, there was from all of the emotions that I was feeling in general and the intensity of it, I realized that part of it was pure trauma that I was just carrying around for decades. And then there was also my own true self, which is very, very sensitive and emotional. So I started realizing which parts needed to be healed and which emotions connected to the past and to certain beliefs and thoughts could be really turned down altogether very lovingly. And what was a part of me that was coming from my core, which needed just full acceptance and embracing for the rest of my life to be at peace within myself and to be able to connect with others in the most authentic and loving way that I can. So for me now, because I'm honoring who I am and I'm very sensitive, I don't engage physically with people who are not connected with their emotions. People who have their emotions shut down or they're not. Katie?
Uh-oh, we lost her. Keep going. She'll be back.
Yeah. So people who are not, they have their emotions shut down or they don't know how to or don't want to engage with me emotionally, it's a no for me for physical interaction, intimate physical interaction. Yeah.
I mean, you know that I echo the sentiment of, we're all quite sensitive. I think that's probably
Yes.
why we're doing what we're doing in this project.
The three of us, definitely.
Yeah, it's very one of the things that in listening to you and Katie Jayne was coming up that like I was hearing repeated from both of you a bunch was, also talking about the other bodies, right? It's really challenging for us to talk often about one form of intimacy that's core without talking about another core form of intimacy, right? Because in the same way that the emotional, physical, mental, emotional bodies, the spiritual bodies are all connected as one body, it's the same that's with the intimacy. So it can be very challenging to talk about the emotional intimacy without dipping in a little bit to the physical intimacy or the spiritual intimacy or the sexual intimacy or whatever, these core intimacies are, which is okay. And I think it shows the intricacy of it all, the layers and how they all fit together and why it's that much more important that we really dive deep into these core intimacies, because if we don't dive into the core intimacies within ourselves, then it becomes more challenging to connect the dots with the other intimacies. Jayne, what I was saying was speaking to the fact that both of you had mentioned not just the emotional intimacy, but also connection with physical intimacy, how it's very challenging to speak to one core type of intimacy for a core body without the others, because of how much they flow and impact each other. And, what it comes down to for me is, in my experience of being a trans non-binary person in my transition, I was raised as well with, what Katie Jayne was speaking to of too muchness. You're feeling too much. You're being dramatic. You're, this, that, and the other, like, get over it, all of these things that we would hear, and just the silencing of emotions with women, coming really from the insecurities from others and the paradigm that is socially constructed around emotions in general. And pre my transition, I felt like every emotion effortlessly. Like it seemed like I felt 5,000 emotions at once all the time, and everything felt, again, she's gone. Everything. We're having some tech fun today.
Did she leave any message in the chat so that we can know what's going on with her?
I imagine she said that she got kicked out. That's
just to make sure. Strange. No, the last thing she said was namaste. Okay.
No, she wrote into our Telegram that she's getting kicked out, which is super strange because I'm of course not kicking her out. So I just let her know that I'm not kicking her out. But let's stay on task.
Okay.
So basically, what I was speaking to is I was having all of these emotions, and then when I actually started my transition medically, and I started to undergo hormone replacement therapy with testosterone, I started to have a huge shift in my emotional intimacy and the way that I would be emotional in general. In fact, if it almost showed me how I was very, in one way, very emotionally intimate, and in another way, not. Because the moment that this shifted, I felt so unprepared and I was so overwhelmed. Because what happened was I went from like every crayon in the box of emotion, all the shades, all the layers,
Mm-hmm.
to having very few. And I couldn't understand the emotions I was having as clearly. I couldn't express them as clearly because I couldn't understand them as clearly. And it was super frustrating. And so what happened is like every emotion that was once very clear to a degree. I mean, I'm autistic, so certain things were not clear. But what I thought was very clear at the time, you know, came into just like super angry. And it was just this incredible level of anger. And a lot of the time, one of the questions that comes to a trans person who's starting testosterone, and one of the fears that comes up for a lot of people is like, oh, you're going to become this like incredibly angry, violent person. That's not what happens. It doesn't mean that that couldn't happen, but that doesn't just like only purely
Yeah,
happen
sounds
with
too
the testosterone.
exaggerated. Yeah.
What happens is in society, we have created this construct around who is allowed to feel emotions and express them and which emotions they're allowed to and not,
Mm-hmm,
right?
mm-hmm.
And then we do not really talk about this very clearly and effectively as a whole in society around how that connects to hormones and how hormones are essentially 100% in my belief 100% of why this, how we feel, how we're able to express or not, all of these things our hormones have a huge impact. And so because we don't have this communication and everything, what happens is once you have a shift in your hormones, like even, okay, let's imagine it's not someone who's transitioning. Let's say it's someone who has a biologically female body and they are undergoing menopause, right? That's a huge hormone shift. There's a huge drop in estrogen. Therefore, estrogen, testosterone have the propensity to be a little bit more level, or even the testosterone can even increase. And the emotions change, right? And we often talk about menopause as very big mood swings, a lot more sort of anger and aggression. So, a lot of emotional intimacy for me has been about addressing in myself the understanding and understanding of the programming that we've had societally, how much is not conveyed within hormones. And instead of like quick blame or quick assumption, not either on the self or any number of things, just saying, okay, look, we have these powerful hormone systems and right now, my hormones are different. And so I'm having a different relationship with emotions compared to usual. And I am reharmonizing, reintroducing myself to my emotional body. It's a whole new wave of emotional intimacy. So that was something that was coming up to me while I was
Yeah.
listening to both of you.
Thank you, dear. Thank you for sharing this. I remember very well this conversation when I was in New York because I was quite blown away by your experience in the transition and afterwards. And I thought hormones were very relevant in our human experience, but I didn't know that it was to such extent. And it really makes a huge difference in how you experience life, the level of sensitivity and the level of, because if I'm not wrong, you also mentioned that it was easier for you, for example, to write poetry and other things that come with maybe being more emotional, being more sensitive. But then you're also able with more testosterone to deal with things in a different way that may be more practical, or you feel more confident or whatever. And this is I find this amazing. And at this very moment, I can also share something about hormones. I'm not having my period, and I don't know if it's going to go back. And fortunately, my sexualness is still active. But what I have found in these past months is that I don't have such strong change in my perception of reality and my emotional self, like the week prior to having my period has always been pretty intense, and I've been dealing with it very consciously in the last years. Before, it was like, oh my God, I'm like, I lose myself during this week. I feel all sorts of things. My perspective on myself and on life and on other people changes, and I am so at the edge of myself. Well, now I'm not having this these big differences. And I think that from a male body perspective that is not going through these main shifts during the month, like 4 kind of shifts, let's say, in general during the month, your perspective on life is very different. If you don't get to understand how a female body works and how it's influenced by all of these emotions and different ways of perceiving yourself, if you don't want to know about that and understand that and accept that, and try to connect with another human being who has a very different internal experience as a human, then, for example, now that we're talking about this very clearly, the emotional connection is going to get lost several times of the month. I'm sure of that, because you are not really embracing the other person. And I'm not saying that people on a female body don't have to make themselves also responsible for their emotions and their highs and their lows and everything. There's quite a lot of inner work to do there. But if the masculine energy cannot embrace and understand that, and the difference in how the emotional stability is felt, well, I think that's a major misunderstanding and a major path to failure in a relationship, in an intimate relationship.
That's interesting. Yeah, I think. And by the way, KJ is restarting her computer, so we've been trying.
I thought you were reading something. I realized.
No, I'm communicating with her. Here we go. Okay.
Oh.
Yes.
Thank God.
May just
Welcome,
finish the thought. So
welcome.
I'm gonna reply to that thought before my thought's gone.
Yeah.
So I feel that something that came up within what you were sharing, May, which is very interesting, and I agree. Like there's a couple of things, because one, right, the female body, yes, there's a cycle that, first of all, probably the majority of male-bodied individuals on this planet do not understand it. And it's not totally your fault. It's as we spoke about in the last episode, sex education and all of that has been totally awful, especially in America, but in other places as well. And so there is absolutely no discussion whatsoever in terms of, these cycles. Like we're often split off between the sexes, which isn't even always relevant, and it doesn't help people when they're transitioning. And so if we don't understand these cycles that are happening within a female body individual, then we don't understand also how to support that and how to hold space for that. And it's not embraced in society at large on how to pay attention to that and talk about that. On the flip side of what you were saying, May, I started to think about something that I have thought about, but not really in this context as much before, which is it's really easy for us to say, um, well, men don't have hormonal cycles and things like this. That's not actually true. The same way that the female body goes through cycles hormonally, the male body also can go through cycles, and the hormones can oscillate. I know this, for example, as me taking testosterone on a weekly basis. I don't take my testosterone and then also my body makes testosterone naturally, and then it's always level like this. That's not a thing. On Tuesdays, when I take my shot day, my hormone level goes from this, my testosterone goes up like this, and then it can stay kind of like that for a day or so, and then it starts to go back down again, right? And so I go through my own cycle, and we don't, as society as a whole, often create space to talk about that and to allow for the understanding that a lot of what's not happening within the cycles and the communication and understanding of the emotions as the cycle is going is also coming within the male bodied experience. Because once you're told, nope, you are not allowed to feel anything other than anger, joy, pleasure, like when you're not allowed to feel anything basically other than those three things, and then you do, and that oscillates, there's not really space for that at all. So I think what we can take away from this is, or at least what I'm taking away from this is, and sharing is, if we can come into a space where we can acknowledge there is an emotional cycle that is connected to the hormonal cycle, regardless of your sex and regardless of your gender, and what can we do to hold space to learn about these, to be open to discussing them, and to hold space for the changes within them and the learning on how to do that, then we can start to talk about how we can support each other within that as well. And I also want to say welcome to Raven and Alice. Honestly, you missed the first half of the conversation, was great, but we had a lot of tech fun, so you're better off coming now anyway.
Yes.
Yes, hello, y'all. Sorry about that. The tech fun got me kicked out of my computer. And I'm happy to be back. I just wanted to check on the comments real quick.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes. Yeah, we can respond to messages. Do either of you want to respond what I just said?
Oh, yes. Yeah, so I'll jump in. I do apologize that I missed the last part of the discussion. And absolutely, like, our emotions are tied to cycles, hormonal and otherwise, as I'm PMSing as we speak. And that also is different from body to body and brain to brain. I've been learning about how being neurospicy, neurodiverse in my 30s is affecting my body. And there is connections between like hormone dumping and ADHD brains versus not ADHD brains. So learning about how I personally feel during different parts of my hormonal cycle, and not like making that, assuming or internalizing that I'm crazy or I'm too much or I'm feeling too much. This is how I'm experiencing this hormonal cycle in my body. I get even more sensitive, already a super touchy-feely Scorpio. And, so giving myself grace and compassion, those are components, right, that build emotional intimacy with myself. And then to be able to express my needs so that my partner, in this case, can, hold space. Because also if I don't speak, he's not going to know. And so it's not fair to him to project, whatever it is on him, or be like, oh, well, I'm not being supported. Well, did I ask? Did I communicate? Those are all part and parcel, right, of vulnerability with yourself first and foremost. And absolutely, I agree. I know I've also recently been learning about what Jamie said about men and male bodies experiencing differently.
Yeah, with the hormones. And
yeah,
do you find it, Katie, easier now to express what you need for emotional support from your partner or partners?
Yeah, that's an ongoing journey, because we've talked a little bit about societal hindrances to us understanding our bodies, right? Our lack of sex education in the US, for sure, especially. But I have, again, a slightly different background, having been raised in a Christian cult. I wasn't given any information. We did not talk about that at all. And so, to a degree, the woman's cycle, our period, our menstruation was denigrated, and also told that it was kind of something dirty. The boys don't need to know about that. I have 4 brothers, like, put that stuff away. They don't need to see it. So I'm still working through some layers of that shame and guilt of feeling like I'm too much. So being able to communicate it in the moment, I'm getting better. I'm not always there, but I am also much better at, once I've had some time to process the feelings, whether it's a few hours or the next day, to come back and say, hey, I just want to let you know this is how I was feeling in that moment.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't say it, but I don't want you to think you did anything wrong, or this is what was going through my brain. So I'm not always able to do it in the moment, because humaning, we're not perfect, but I'm getting much better. So I do appreciate that comment or our question, because it's very important to talk about, how we communicate with each other.
Wonderful. The most important thing is that you're getting better at it. I am also doing the same. I really think it's so important. First, to acknowledge how you feel, and then let know your partner or your intimate, whichever intimate partner, doesn't matter the label or the kind of relationship. If there's something important going inside you emotionally, you either take the time for yourself, or if you remain with the other person physically, express it, and don't expect the other person. The other person may be very intuitive and they may know you very well, and maybe sometimes or most times they may know what's going on with you. But we cannot assume or expect that everybody is all the time going to know how we're feeling. And it's our responsibility to let everybody know, everybody that is appropriate to do so in an intimate situation, how we're feeling. And also this, I'm going to bring something interesting in. That is key, to know who we have in front of us. If who we have in front of us cannot deal with our internal emotional world, when we're not attacking, where we're not confronting the other person in any possible, but we're just sharing, expressing how we're feeling. If the other person cannot deal with that, for me, that's very relevant information as to whether there is a future for us or not. If the person can and is interested in learning and in being more open to my emotional self, wonderful. But if I see that they're not interested, or they immediately shut down, that would be too challenging for me to get into an intimate relationship.
Yeah,
What do you think?
For sure. No, I agree. Like, we get to gauge, right? Use our discernment on a level of emotional intimacy. Like you said, May, I value that, right? I highly value, after all the work I've done on myself, to work through my trauma, as we have all talked about. That's the kind of people I desire to surround myself with, right?
Mm-hmm,
Whether
mm-hmm.
it's professionally, friendship, emotionally, intimately, for sure. We all value, somebody that can communicate on the same level. And Jamie, if you had any response to May, awesome. And then we're gonna get to wrapping up here and to address comments.
Yes. Yeah, no, I think both well said and beautiful shares of your experiences. I think what it really comes down to is, again, we need to have a deeper intimacy with our own emotional bodies and our own emotions in order to communicate them. And we also require safety, right? To feel safe in order to communicate those things, and to not, no matter how psychic everyone is, to not assume where someone's intention is or what they meant, because there are so many different ways to communicate, and everyone has different love languages. Everyone has different ways that they come across in a particular form of communication, whether it's on the phone, whether it's in the video, whether it's in text, whether it's in audio. We have so many more ways to communicate than we once did, right? Once upon a time, it was handwritten letters
and line
and verbal. But even before that, right? Even before that, and so it's definitely something that is a learning experience, and I think that through getting intimate with intimacy, we're going to touch upon that. This is definitely not our last conversation on the emotional intimacy and the emotional body. There's so much to touch upon here, and we have just touched the surface. To me, the something that I'm incredibly passionate about is actually not totally stripping apart the aspects of gender and sex in this conversation, but really getting to understand that if there had to be, like, if I could explain it in a way that would be like a pyramid effect of hierarchy, I would say that hormones is like 98% of the sky. Like, it is 98% of what is actually dictating everything in terms of our emotions. And the way that we process them comes from the hormones, but also our own actual cognitive functioning, and then what we allow ourselves based on the judgments and constructs that are created societally that come in. And the societal constructs and programming, that is where the gender and sex comes in. And yes, the sex chromosomes are relevant here, but really in our moment to moment and day to day, my deepest understanding and experience is from hormones. And I'm very passionate about having the medical trans non-binary communities and the non-medical trans non-binary communities being able to have huge voice to this, because this is like the living, breathing, I say this not with lack of sensitivity, although it may sound like experiment, of an expression of where this is at. Because in a way, it is an experiment. We're learning and figuring it out as we go along. They don't really know, because they haven't really created that. They haven't really done a lot of tests and things like this on this. So we've had some awesome comments come through that especially have to do with this, which is why I also wanted to finish that thought. So let's tap in, and I want to thank Alice and Raven for really like sharing some incredible stuff here.
Absolutely.
So Alice said, trans women have cycles like female-bodied individuals. It's been a hell of a learning opportunity for sure. And that's 1000% true for anyone who has gone through and is going through medicalized transition. And obviously, Alice, you know this, but I'm explaining this for people who are not us. So if you are, trans and non-binary people may or may not go through a medical transition, and this has a huge weight on how one experiences emotional intimacy and the emotional body. Because if you go through your transition and you do not go through a medicalized transition where you choose as part of that to be hormone replacement therapy, then you are undergoing a social transition while having the same hormone experience and everything. And that's its own learning curve and its own way of processing and looking at all of this as well. And Alice shared that the testosterone cycle is longer and slower for males. That's my understanding of it anyways. It's something like a 6 months to a year cycle, and it's been a while since I looked into it, which is totally interesting. Alice, I didn't know that, but I would say that it does not feel that way. It definitely doesn't feel that way at all. I feel like in a way, I actually feel not quite as extreme of the shifts, but not as far off as I did prior. Like before, I might have said that my emotional oscillation could be like this. And now I would say it's still sort of like this. Like it still definitely oscillates throughout the week. Like I can 1000% tell the immediate difference pretty much within the hour of taking my testosterone shot. I can feel the difference in my emotional body and what is going on. I tend to be more erotically inclined and aroused. I tend to be more confident and alert. I tend to be more pragmatic. It really is, but it takes time to really like look at this. It's taking time for me to look at these cycles. Raven said, I absolutely agree 100%. Women and men each go through their cycles. It's processing and how to even balance hormones naturally, emotionally, and physically. 100%. There are so many ways to balance our hormones that are not medical, and, you know, honoring that as well. Raven sent this message for you, Katie Jayne, that she resonates with the religion dogma as well. And what else here? Raven says, I agree 100. We have to be completely honest with self to the deepest part of our intimate on all levels. Yes, yes, yes. Alice said, handwritten letters should make a comeback.
100% agree.
Yeah,
my partner and I write notes and letters back and forth.
That's wonderful, dude. Yeah.
Yeah, Raven also agrees with it. Alice says, less relevant than people think. The odds you don't have a traditional XX and XY gene are higher than you think. 100% true. 100% true.
I'd be super interested to learn more about that, honestly, Alice, because I wonder how that would affect one's experience of gender, right? Like sometimes I've felt a little non-binary or more masculine or feminine, and you know, everything's a spectrum, right? So I love that question, that comment. It's very interesting.
Yeah. It speaks to intersexuality, which is a very interesting conversation. Right. How that relates, and is way more common, and it also relates to a really fun episode that we all want to do, talking about genitalia. That will be coming up for sure. Alice says, unless you get a panel and actually check, you could be one of hundreds of combinations. Absolutely. Thank you for bringing that to the forefront. 2.5 years of lived experience here, medical transition. I also know some great people who've decided not to medically transition. Their perspectives are outstanding. Yes, all of our perspectives are super, super valid. And this allows us to get a comprehensive understanding, right? And if we don't allow for the platform for us to all share, then we're not going to know. This is the point of these conversations. Traditional HRT practices are fascinating. Yes. They absolutely are. And it's also important to note, right, like what I was saying as well with menopause, we may have lost you at that point, Katie Jayne. I was talking about menopause and how that shifts, of course, the hormones of estrogen drop way down. And so that can bring a lot of oscillation with our emotional body and intimacy as well, right? And even our desire to be emotionally intimate. But on the flip side, right, as male-bodied individuals increase in age, their testosterone tends to decrease. And so actually hormone replacement therapy is not only for trans people, of course, it's for people who are going through also menopause, can also be through people who are going through yes, thank you. I was like, how do I phrase this? You know, just going through life, male-bodied, and having that decrease in testosterone can change things as well. Raven says, well, yes, it does. And I don't have any menopause symptoms at all due to herbs. Yeah, you're crushing it.
That's amazing.
If anyone wants to learn about that, reach out to Raven for sure. She's awesome for that. May, would you like to let people know what they can expect for next weekend? And
before we close, I wanted to say something that came up while either you, Jamie, or Katie were talking, and connected to emotional intimacy, and that's empathy. It suddenly came to me that if you're not emotionally connected with yourself, it's very, very unlikely that you feel empathy for or with another human being. So this concept of empathy just came to me as something to look into with our emotional selves, definitely, because you can interact with any kind of human being in any situation, but true connection, if there is no emotional understanding or intention of understanding the other one, I don't see how the connection is made. I can see very interesting ways of interacting, but if there is no emotional interaction, exchange, or perception of the other one, then I don't see my concept of human connection has to happen through the emotional self to some extent.
Well, yeah, we're human. As we said, I absolutely agree. Humans are emotional, and so we're not actually having a human connection if we're not having an emotional connection. 100% agree.
Yep, and I think that's what has made me a super connector since I was little. I have always had that empathy and curiosity about other people and how they're doing, why they're feeling the way they are, why they think the way they are, right? The way that they do. And so I've just always naturally been able to hold that space too, right? Because I'm so curious, and I know that there's so much individuation in the world, in the human experience, and like, what can I learn? I love hearing different perspectives, and so when it comes to emotions, yeah, it's the same thing. And especially now where I'm at in my journey of embracing all the feelings, right? Like we've been talking about. Other people come to me with their feelings, and they always have come and felt comfortable to be the same.
I think
that's
the three of us, I think we're great at that, and that's why we're so passionate about intimacy, and we are very, very respectful with how other people feel, and we always try to make people feel safe at home with us, and then there can be a sexual interaction or not, but at least that emotionally, which is, I think, one of the greatest experience of yourself, you feel that the other human being is really embracing you and supporting you in who you are, because you can disagree in the thoughts or beliefs. Well, I agree on this or I agree on that, but the moment that you are not embracing how someone is feeling, you are creating a very unpleasant experience for the other person. So I think that's very important that we have our emotional bodies and emotional intimacy at the forefront of our life, of our human experience with ourselves and with others.
Awesome.
And
I just wanted to see, Alice said, write it down. I think, Jamie, that was to you about the series. Raven was agreeing with you, May, about empathy. Raven said, being able to be vulnerable as well as true strength. Yes, I learned in about 2020 that vulnerability is a superpower for sure. And I appreciate the comment, Alice. So to wrap it up, May was going to let us know about next week's content.
Well, but just because I introduced the concept of the empathy and everything, you can just go ahead and say whatever you have to say about next week that I'm maybe not so updated right now.
Sure. So next week we will be back on Saturday or Sunday at 11 a.m. Eastern Time, 9:30 a.m. PST time. If you're in Arizona, or if you're not, it's so confusing.
11:30. You said 11, but it's 11:30.
11:30. Yeah, no, 11:30 a.m. Eastern Time, 9:30 a.m. If you're in Arizona, Mountain Standard Time. There you go.
And then 8:30
Pacific Time, 8:30 a.m. and CET time will still be 6:30 p.m. And we look forward to seeing you. You'll want to pay attention to whether our stream will be on Saturday or Sunday. We figure it out every week because,
but today I actually started at 5:30 Central European time. Our time has changed.
Oh, your time did change.
Yeah, that's why I was late. So we started at my 5:30.
Okay, so yeah, so then your time changes.
That's the one we're going to keep?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
So 5:30 for most of Europe.
Okay, so 5:30 for Europe. There we go.
Okay.
And you can find this out much clearer in our stream notes. So if you go to our details, you'll be able to see all of that. You can find us on OnlyFans, which we're in the process of navigating our OnlyFans to get it set up, but it will be set up very soon. It is actually set up, but we just don't have any content there yet because we're in the verification process. You can find us on the Getting Intimate with Intimacy YouTube, and InsightTimer will soon have our content. You can go to this link that we are streaming down below, wake-in.com/intimacy, and get all of our links, learn more about us, learn more about our services, and we are so excited to continue this conversation. We will probably be talking about one of the other core forms of intimacy because, as we promised, we are easing you into the conversation. But this has been amazing, and if you love this conversation, please let us know. Comments, subscribe to the platform, and we look forward to seeing you. KJ, do you want to
wrap up?
Close us out.
Yes, thank you all for being here. And remember, intimacy starts within.
Namaste, everyone. We'll see
we
you
love you.
We love
see
you.
you soon.
Bye-bye.